And this has been a historical issue over the years when I've covered matches in Lauderhill. I remember, for example, in 2018, one of the things that put the nail in the coffin for the CPL, the Caribbean Premier League, coming to Florida, they came in 2016, had 10,000 people, doubleheaders. It was a great event in 2016. 2017, the crowds went down a little bit because the previous year, even though there was a sellout crowd, just the fan amenities were really non-existent, and it was sweltering heat, 90 degrees in South Florida in August with 90% humidity is just unbearable. And they were running out of beer, they were running out of water, people were passing out in the crowd. It was just not a very nice, hospitable experience for fans, and that kind of turned a lot of people off. Fast forward to 2018, they had pushed the games into the evening to kind of adjust for the heat and make it a little bit more comfortable weather-wise and take advantage of the floodlights. But the crowds were down to about 2,000 people on the weekend for Trinidad and Tobago, which is the biggest draw card, with Dwayne Bravo and all the Trinidad and Tobago players, and Ali Khan, who at this point was an American superstar.
That's right.
And then you get and then they made the fatal error of, instead of just scheduling weekend games on the Saturday and Sunday, they tried to put a midweek game to satisfy a midweek crowd, again at night after work, but a midweek game with Andre Russell, one of the biggest T20 superstars in the world, and Steve Smith, one of the highest ranked batsmen in the world for Australia, who was in exile after the Sandpaper Gate incident.
Right.
Steve Smith and Andre Russell in Florida. Couldn't ask for two bigger draw cards, and they had 700 people in the crowd. You could hear the conversations on the field. They were echoing across the stadium in Lauderhill because it was so quiet, and it was just such a dismal and almost a funereal atmosphere at the ground. And they've not come back since then.
Well, they came back. They didn't come back, right? But I attended maybe 2 years ago India, West Indies.
But again, India, like you said, India, New York, India, Pakistan, India, anywhere will draw. You're never going to struggle to get India. The challenge in America has been, and the challenge in a lot of other countries in the world has been, well, yeah, you're never going to struggle to sell out India in London, in Sydney, in New York, in Florida. How are you going to sell out USA versus Afghanistan or USA versus Ireland? How are you going to sell out New Zealand versus Sri Lanka or a CPL match? And that has been the struggle, and you experienced that firsthand in the Pearls Cup, where that Thursday match had to be scrapped. So how did that open your eyes to some of the challenges that you were going to face over the next year or two?
The fact of the matter is, what I realized was, when you think that you're going to televise this event, and you think ESPN is going to come right in and support it, in the end, we had to pay ESPN $200,000 to televise the event. That's not a good thing. No. But we went ahead and did it because, you know what? I believe the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times said the event would have over 100 million people watching on worldwide TV over the 3 days or 2 days. And I guess it did. We got some trickle-down monies from TV companies who then did pay some rights, and it helped a little bit. But in the end, we lose there. And the next thing you might know is that the stadium was never designed for TV. So we had to build the TV stand in the north and then create a TV camera platform on the south. So there were costs. We were ready to create VIP areas, but no one wanted to pay the $150 for an all-inclusive VIP club. We ended up having a tent and had to, almost give it away for people to use. So things I was used to in the West Indies, I would say what we thought would be an amazing West Indies culture to have everybody just come to to Fort Lauderdale and see it. Perhaps if it had been New Zealand, West Indies, that would have been great.
And they came 2 years later in 2012. They did play New Zealand, and that was a sellout crowd. They did have 15,000 people there for that match.
So I think that was our problem. But again, remember, we didn't know who New Zealand was going to play until teams were knocked out. And then New Zealand, we had already talked to a few teams saying, hey, if you make the finals, semifinals, there's no way you can come play in our event. But if you're knocked out in the quarterfinals, we'd like you to consider playing. Well, Sri Lanka raised their hand and said, we're coming. And then, by the way, coming doesn't mean what you think, because then they wanted to make sure they got paid whatever New Zealand got paid. Well, New Zealand is our sponsor and our host in making this happen. And so we had to, you learn very, very quickly about the economics of cricket, and they're difficult. They're difficult in a country like the United States. So, hey, we did it. We were the first event of its kind in the United States, I guess, since the USA played Canada and New York in the 1840s. I was very, very proud of the event. In the end, I remain proud. And when I say that we lost money, our Indian investor bailed us out. So all bills were paid. By the way, let me tell you one other thing. I probably paid the most expensive police bill in the history of sports. And why is that? Because the whole business of Pakistan not being able to host international cricket was due to the fact that it was the Sri Lankan team that was attacked. Well, guess what that led to? Department of Defense, FBI, SBI in the state of Florida, and local police triple charged for our security because Sri Lanka was our team.
And I remember they had commandos. They had like AK-47 commandos protecting them when they were at training sessions in Lauderhill. And they were very, very apprehensive to do any fan interactions until both games were over. After the second and final match was over on Sunday, then they kind of loosened up. Then they went into the crowd because there was several busloads of fans who came down from Washington, D.C., I remember, who were big Sri Lankan supporters.
$500,000 that no other event would have ever paid for.
Yeah.
That we had to pay for just to kind of launch it. And my attitude was, okay, this is our first one. This is the learning experience. This is what we had to pay. But 100 million people watched on TV. Is ESPN not going to take advantage? Are they going to stiff us, another time? I don't think so. And I think that the deals that West Indies were able to put together down the road were less onerous. But we had the most onerous budgeting that we had to do. But again, our Indian investor came through. So again, I was ready. We had that debt, but I was getting it paid. And I felt like we had kicked off my vision, which was I promised international cricket in the United States, and I promised that the United States team would be in such an event. And I was very, very close to a $60 million deal with New Zealand and an Indian businessman, an Australian businessman. And I was very, very excited about where we were.
Having gone through that though, that event and seeing the relative fan support, especially taking into context having to cancel that Thursday match, one of the things I find again fascinating, having made that comparison with the CPL and how their ticket sales went over the years, the U.S. cricket fan base. Again, these are cricket fans in America, not fans of American cricket. And even with those cricket fans in America are very parochial. I mean, I've been to NFL games in London. I went to see the Giants, been a Giants fan my whole life. And when they played at Twickenham a couple years ago against the Rams, I went to that and have spoken to fans who've been to the games at Wembley as well. And it was fascinating to me because at that game, there might have been about 10,000 Giants fans who flew over from New York to go to Twickenham. There are very, very few Rams fans. I don't think hardly anybody flew over from Los Angeles. But you still had 65, 70,000 people who were at that game in London who were just NFL fans. And the whole stadium is just full of people wearing Saints jerseys, Dolphins jerseys, Seahawks jerseys, Cardinals jerseys, Eagles jerseys, Cowboys jerseys. I'm at a Giants game with all these Eagles and Cowboys fans wanting to talk to me because I've got an American accent and they want to talk about football because they're from London and this and that. And I'm like, you're an Eagles fan, you're a Cowboys fan. I don't want to talk to you. Get away from me. But they were just enthusiastic about the idea of the NFL being in London and selling the game out. And you don't have that.
Peter, I was naive to that. I thought that just the fact that it was international cricket with world champion caliber players would make us have to rent grandstands to have 30,000 people there. Okay. What I learned, and I should have known this because there's stories in the West Indies. Again, I'm an avid fan of Cricket West Indies. I'm proud of what they've been able to do. I hope they have another World Cup. They deserve another World Cup. But let's just say that I know and heard stories that in Barbados, who was where I lived, I had a home in Barbados, got to know it so well that there was a story of the West Indies playing somebody. I'm not sure who they played, but because there was one or no Barbadians on the team, the Barbadian fans protested the game, and it was, nobody was in Kensington Oval because they weren't happy to see the West Indies. I will argue, Peter, that in the 75 and 79 World Championship teams where the World Cup was won by the West Indies, that the West Indies still didn't put the best team on the field. And that's because when you have all these countries, you could have 2 Trinis and 2 Jamaicans and maybe 2 Antiguans, but you're not going to have 4. Even if it was, I don't think that Australia says we have too many guys from Perth on the team. But the West Indies is not a country. It's a region. And so those countries, the fact that we had Jamaica, I thought with all the Jamaicans that live in the South Florida region, it would be full, absolutely full, just to see Jamaica play, and then stay for the second game, because we played the U.S. game first.
Yep.
So you'd come early, and then there's the match everybody wanted to see, the New Zealand-Sri Lanka game. Well, what I learned was the Guyanese and the Trinis and the Antiguans and the Kitishans, etc. They weren't interested. They weren't interested to watch the U.S. play or the Jamaicans play, and that surprised me greatly.